Okay, bore da pawb a chroeso, good morning everyone and welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Environment, Regeneration and Street Scene Services Scrutiny Committee on the 17th of January 2025. I'm Councillor Sean Percy and I'll be chairing the meeting today. Before we move on with the meeting, just the usual housekeeping note, the meeting will be recorded today. And could anybody in the meeting please ensure your phones are switched to silent during the meeting. Members, officers in the chamber, can you just raise your hand if you need to speak, and also please make sure you're using your microphones when speaking. And those online, please raise your virtual hand and I will call you in then. In terms of the chat function for those online, can you please limit that to any technical issues rather than use it to contribute to the meeting, please? And again, for those online, for those who are participating in the meeting, a reminder of your requirement to have your camera on. Thank you. So I'll move on now to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members?
I see no declarations, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll now move on to agenda item 3, and that's to the budget 2025-2026. So we're looking at the elements in the budget that fall under the remit of our committee. Members, there's a couple of points to make here. Of course, we have scrutinised these proposals previously before the last consultation, and we've had a discussion in pre-briefing this week, and I hope members have had a chance to refresh themselves with the minutes from the last meeting as well. So I'm hoping we can avoid repeat questions where possible. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to just check with him whether he wants to add anything to the point. He's shaking his head already. Brilliant. I'm going to go to Nicola, the director, just to give a brief overview of some of the items that have come out since the last report, and any changes that have been made. And then we'll go line by line through the budget items. I won't be asking officers to introduce each budget item. I'll go straight to questions, if that's okay. Again, we've been through these items before. Our members have had a chance to review the minutes and the recording of the last meeting, so that should help us get through them in a timely manner. Yeah, I've just been told I need to read another line. Yeah, so the comments in today's meeting will form part of the formal consultation response for the budget. And members are encouraged to put forward any alternative proposals during the meeting, which could be considered once the consultation period has ended. Thanks for the nudge on that one, Tom. So I'll hand over to Nicola now just to give us a brief introduction, and then we'll go through the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair has indicated, we had quite a lengthy budget scrutiny meeting last year, where we were originally as a directorate, excuse me, as a directorate aiming to achieve about a £2.35 million saving overall, to achieve the 5% target that everyone was given. Now, I appreciate this budget for my directorate is split between this scrutiny committee and the education and lifelong learning and leisure scrutiny meeting, and I understand that that took place yesterday. So the public protection services that Kerry is responsible for would come under that scrutiny meeting, so we won't go into those today. But as I say, we originally had a target of about 2.35 million. Since the scrutiny meeting that took place last year, some of the budget proposals have been removed. So the 3 weekly waste collections, which was a saving of 539,000, has now been removed from the consultation. The green waste charges, which was 200,000, have now been removed. The neighbourhood savings, and that amounted to a reduction in jobs, permanent jobs and seasonal jobs, amounting to £379,000. Those have been removed from the budget proposals. And then the drainage gang, if you recall, we were proposing to remove one of the drainage gangs, and that would have resulted in a saving of £310,000. So that adds up to £1.438 million worth of savings that have been removed from the Environment and Regeneration budget proposals. So they have now been removed from consideration to reflect the concerns perhaps and the discussion that has taken place previously. So the budget consultation that has gone out doesn't include those. There are still some, big savings to be achieved for our directorate, and there will obviously be impacts associated with them, because when you make cuts, there are always impacts. But we are more than happy to go through each and every one of your questions and hopefully give you as much information as possible. And if we don't have the information to satisfy you today, we will go away and get it and provide that to you. I do appreciate from discussions that I had with Sean earlier on, some of the information that was requested previously in the original scrutiny meeting hasn't been circulated. So I apologise for that. It's been hectic and we've been trying to do 1,000,001 things. But so if we don't provide you with the information you've requested, hopefully that won't happen. But if we don't do it again, then we are more than happy to be nudged and reminded, and we will send it out to you. So I think that's about it from me, Chair.
Thanks, Nicola, for the introduction, and bear with us with the fire alarm a second. Thanks for bearing with us. We did think for a moment we'd need to evacuate the chamber, but because the fire alarm test is a little late today, but I think we're okay. Right. So where was I? I was thanking Nicola for the introduction there to the report, and it was a useful reminder, actually, the feedback we gave in the last session, I'm sure, was useful to the cabinet and officers in deciding what proposals to take out when we did have that more favourable settlement. I see the leader nod in there, so it's just a reminder these sessions are important. One last thing I forgot to mention earlier was when we get to the end of the budget items, the last two, ENVAA and AB, we will need to go into private to deal with those. It's just in relation to the questions we've had indicated in pre-brief that are of a sensitive nature. So we'll be going into private towards the end of the meeting just to address those questions from members. So I'll move us straight into the agenda pack now. So we're at the top of the table with ENVA. I have a question from Carol Clement-Williams here. Carol, are you there online?
Yeah, Chair. Reading back on the minutes, I think that and Nicola's response there about the increase in the charges, it is disappointing that we haven't got the figures that we asked for. We've always had them in years gone by. When there's been increases in charges, they always used to be included in the papers. To come, if there is a figure of 11,000, then some math must have been done somewhere, and I know Nicola's apologised, but I really think it should have been in there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Carol. I've got Dave here in the chamber. I think he has the figures to hand, hopefully.
Yes, thank you, Chair. What I would say to members is that I did provide those figures to my colleagues, but there must have been some administrative error there. But I can take you through those figures, and I'm sure Tom can circulate the note that I provided with him so that you've got a hard copy record of it. So in terms of ENVA, we're proposing an increase in fee and charges of £11,000. I note the questions that you've submitted. There are 4 areas that we will be proposing to increase the fees. I'll very quickly go through those. The first of which is responses to highway record inquiries. The current standard fee is £50, and we're proposing to increase that fee by £20. we usually have about 260 to 270 inquiries per annum, and that would generate, we anticipate, in the region of £5,380. In the past, the next proposal is we have a lot of inquiries from solicitors acting on behalf of clients, inquiring and doing searches. We are going to introduce a charge for responding to solicitors going forward. So as I say, we've done that free of charge in the past. We've done some time analysis, and we propose that we will be charging solicitors £70 per letter. There are limited numbers of letters that we respond to, but they are about 20 per annum, and that would generate a further £1,400 of income. The third section are where we have current standard fees for vetting of technical approvals for Section 38 and 278 works on the highways by developers. So for construction works less than £7,000, the current standard fee is £300, and we propose to increase that by £200. There are limited numbers of developments on this, so it's not going to be a huge income, and estimated at £400. For works works less than 15,000, the current standard fee is £600, and we propose to increase that by £250. That will generate a further £750. And then for construction works greater than 15,000, the standard fee is £1,500, and we propose to increase that by £300 to £1,800, and that will generate a further £1,800. And then minimum inspection fees for site visits for works up to a value of 15,000. Current standard fees are 1,125. We're proposing to increase that fee to £450, which will generate £1,350. So that gives you the breakdown of the £11,000 there. Our actual table comes to 11,080, but that's the breakdown, and we can circulate that for members after the meeting.
Thank you for that. Are there any follow-up questions from members on that now the information's been provided?
Can I just
Carol?
say thank you very much? That was very useful. It's nice to know what these increases are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol, and thanks, Dave, for that one. I'll move on now to ENVB. This was the transport support reduction in revenue support on bus services. I've got an indication on this one from Councillor Bob Wilford. Bob.
Thank you, Chair. My question regarding this was, it wasn't long ago that we were sitting down and looking at the routes, how they've been improved, and we're working with bus companies to improve those routes. Do we know how that's going to affect those improvements? Has that been written up yet? And also, obviously, as is put in the risk and impact comments, there is a perception kind of problem here. In one hand, we're working with the bus companies to improve our bus routes, and then we're removing funding with the other hand.
Thanks, Bob. Dave Griffiths.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wolford, for the questions. As you know, we worked through an extensive consultation exercise on the bus subsidies as a result of the bus emergency fund coming to an end. What I can say is that we've now got a sort of base network in place that is funded. We've had reassurances from Welsh Government that they will provide the same funding that we have this year for next financial year. So the risk is significantly reduced now in what we have. We've had some benefits, and we've had some increased services. They will be retained. But what I can report for members is that as part of Welsh Government's budget setting round, a further £11 million has been made available across Wales to sustain those bus services next financial year. So the risk is fairly limited now. We believe that all of those services that we currently enjoy will be retained. We're not cutting the whole budget. It's part of the budget. So we will have some resilience, but obviously a little bit less than we have in the past. But as I say, with that additional, our share of that 11 million, I think we'll be in a good position, and we won't see any reductions on the network during the next financial year.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, thank you for that, David. That's very helpful. Could we just ask that if any of those circumstances change in the meantime, that we're informed as soon as possible, so we're ahead of the game if our residents come back to us? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yes, by all means, Councillor.
Thank you. I think the only thing I'd add is worth noting as well that the sort of funding arrangements as they stand are almost an interim arrangement now, aren't they, as a precursor to the franchising. So all the timescales have shifted a little bit on franchising over time. The whole funding structure is going to change completely, isn't it, in a few years? So this is very much a stopgap measure at the moment. Your microphone, sorry, Dave.
That's correct, Councillor Percy. They will be put in the papers through the secondary legislative change in the Senedd and Parliament this autumn, with a view to the franchise arrangement coming into place in the Southwest in 26-27. So there is a huge piece of work going on in the background in that respect.
Thank you. Okay, I've got no more indications on that item, so I'll move on to ENVC. And my first indication on this one is from Councillor Carol Clem-Williams. Carol.
Thanks, Chair. I think it was answered reading back on the minutes. I've just got the hospital on the line, so I'm going to duck out of the meeting for a couple of minutes, if that's okay.
No problem. I'll move on to the next question.
Thank you.
Next question. Thanks, Carol. Kathy, I had an indication from you in pre-briefing as well.
Yeah, I'd agree with Carol. Having read back through the notes of the previous meeting, we did cover this fairly comprehensively then, so my question's certainly already been answered. Thank you.
Fantastic. Are there any other indications on ENVC before I move on? I can't see any at the moment, so we'll move on then to ENVD. We had no indications in pre-briefing on this item. I'll just give a brief opportunity if anyone's got any at the moment. I can't see any there. So then there's ENVE. There were two indications from pre-briefing, but they've also been addressed by review in the previous meeting. So are there any indications in ENVE? That's the transport maintenance external income. No. Okay. So the next one is ENVF, and that is the road safety charges for training courses being increased. The indication I had there was from Councillor Andrew Dacey. I'm not sure if you've still got a question on that one, Andrew.
So same as the previous question as has been answered. I missed the last meeting. I've caught up on it all now, so my question's answered. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I'll move on to ENVG then. So ENVG is maintenance budgets, reduction of the maintenance budget, which is relied upon for bridge inspection. I have an indication from Councillor Robert Wood on this one.
Thanks, Chair. It's good to see that the items that were withdrawn from the budget lines have been taken out. I'm glad of that. But going on to the question, this saving to me seems a little bit on the fragile side. I have read through the minutes on it and what was explained, but how soon do you think, you know, and I know this is a bit of a how long's a piece of string question, but 28,000, and you've put down in the comments there, it could soon be wiped out by one major repair on one bridge. So even though it's in the line, if the inspections are taking longer to do and the deterioration of the bridge is greater, surely then that seems like a bit of a false economy of a saving of 28,000 if even by, you know, your comments there. You say that the work could be that much greater, could be that much more expensive, you know, with inflation, that the 28,000 could be wiped out. And of course, the threat to local economies in the communities as a result of any major bridge closure. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Dave, one for you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This was one of the most difficult service cuts that I had to table out of the cuts that we've discussed this morning for my service area. Perhaps if I can give a little bit of background, just to explain the breakdown of the budget. So the overall budget equates to 564,000. This is split into two areas. So £230,000 of that is for the site inspections and supervision of works. So they are the technical inspection surveys, the general and principal inspections. Then the remaining element of the budget is circa 334,000. And this is the element of the budget that we are suggesting the cut comes from. So this is the preventative work. It's the removal of and devegetation of trees and so forth growing out of the structures potentially. And of course for undertaking minor repairs to the structures. So the savings cut of the 28,000 would be applied to that element of the budget. So we'll be still discharging our statutory duty for the inspection of the structures. But I don't disagree with you. By making that cut, it does. It is a little bit of a false economy, because when we do have to do repairs, it could be that more damage is caused to the structures. So the actual cut to that part of the budget equates to 8%. Now, that will depend upon how the budget is set for next year and any inflationary uplift that would be applied to this budget, which would make that figure slightly more. So, as I say, it is one of the budget heads that we're most anxious about, as it'll affect we're kicking the can down the road a little bit. It's going to cost more later, and that was our concern with it. The unfortunate circumstance that we find ourselves in, having to make the budgets across the services, that I've got very limited areas where I can look elsewhere to make those budget savings. So it is a concern. It is something we can manage, but it could result in increased costs against capital later.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, if I can just come back briefly on it, I know, as I say, you know, it is a tough budget situation, but you know, sometimes it's that minor repair on a bridge, similar to a house, where you unblock a gutter or you do something like that, that prevents thousands having to be spent down the line. You know, I just feel that perhaps it's a little bit of a false economy, but I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. I've got an indication from Councillor Carol Clement-Williams. Is that on this item, Carol?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Sorry about having to
No
leave.
problem.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Rob said, really, we have done this before. This isn't the first time we've done this, and we really paid for it. I know, you know, I do understand how hard it is, but when I was in post, I mean, Dave knows, he's just said it, and I'm just saying that it's terrible we're in this position, because we know it will cost us more later on, and this isn't the first time it's been done, and it's such a shame that we're paying for years and years of austerity, because it's our residents in the end that take the hit. But thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Just a question or observation from me, really, in terms of some of these. I'm sure, you know, in other scrutiny committees having similar conversations. Obviously, we've got some cuts that affect levels of service provision, and others like this one, which appear to be very poor value for money in the long run. And I wonder whether, have we looked at the budget corporately across directorates to try and ensure that we're not maybe having some of these relatively small amounts of money, this is only £28,000 that could actually save us a lot being cut here, whereas actually there's something less valuable in another directorate that, could give way instead. I just wonder whether that's been done at a corporate level. And I've seen Nicola's indicating to come in there.
Yes, we've taken quite a long time to come to this position. Everybody was given a target to achieve. And as I said earlier on, we took off as a consequence of feedback that we've had about just shy of £1.5 million worth of savings were removed from our target because of the impact of some of the budget savings that were originally proposed. But we can't take everything off the table. And to be, I think in the last Scrutiny meeting, we said that some of the proposals that we were looking to deliver were not palatable to officers as well as councillors, but it's the position that we were in financially as local government, not just in Neath Talbot, but across the board. So there have been some similar discussions within each of the other directorates where they have to make savings in relation to adult social care, children's services, education. And I think, if you asked, the staff within those services, they would be probably saying exactly the same as me. So we've all had to make a cut. In previous years, we have looked at delivering strategic savings. So energy being one, home to school transport, accommodation, and whilst cuts have been made there and continue to be considered, it wasn't enough, which is why we had to sort of do the exercise that we've done this year. And if some of these savings are not acceptable, there isn't anything else in the bottom drawer. We don't have anything in our pocket. So it means that we would have to cut some services if these aren't accepted. And that's not a position that we currently want to be in, but it may well be a position that we are in the future if Welsh Government doesn't provide more funding for local authorities. So there aren't any replacement savings for these proposals. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. No, I appreciate that. And I think, it is a difficult time, isn't it, when we're looking at these budgets, when officers and members know the savings are, unpalatable at best, but also, poor value for money, and actually just they're poor decisions that we don't want to take. I suppose, what we need to be assured of is that the full impact of each one of those decisions has been understood and weighed up against the other. And I think that's probably the point I was making. Is there £28,000 somewhere else that might have slightly less impact? As long as we've done that work across directorates, not just within directorates, then, I'd be assured that we've done our best, So I appreciate that. I can't see any other indications on this one. What I did say in pre-brief actually was that we would bring in the discussion on the NVI with this, because it's quite a similar discussion around this was the asset surveys budget reduction. So I just want to check at this point whether members have any additional comments to add on that one. On I, of course, this one is specifically around reducing the surveys / inspection budget, isn't it? In terms of our highways assets. I can't see there's any additional comments from members, but we made the point quite clearly in the last meeting around whether that would lead to poor value for money in future maintenance spending. Okay, I'll jump back for a second to ENVH as well. We didn't have any questions on that one. This was around the pension fund contribution changes, and I don't believe I've got any questions in the chamber today either. No. Okay. So I'll move us now on to ENVK. So this takes us over the page, and this is change in the reduction of the works budget for highways, as well as increases in fees and charges. My first indication is Councillor Rob Wood on this one. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. again, you know, I'm not going to repeat what we did in the scrutiny committee, but an example in my ward where a car was, the underneath of it was ripped by a disintegrating speed cushion. So the question I got is, you know, how long will it be again before the savings year simply equate to what we're paying out in damages on vehicles? Because the speed cushions they use are subject to disintegration. And if this happens more regularly, but we cut in the surveys more often, then there is a higher likelihood for further damage. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. I'm not sure who's taking. I
Chair?
didn't see that, Mike. Sorry.
It's okay.
What's you?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think just to get the difference between the main asset surveys we've got going and then the routine surveys that we have going on the highway for safety. They're not touched at all. They will be carrying on. The highways inspectors will be carrying out all the routine inspections. So that is a separate thing to the surveys, the condition surveys that we do on things like safety fences and cattle grids. And so there's those two sort of things going on. A bit like with the bridges, we will, outside of the revenue budget, there is the capital budget, and it does mean that when we cut the revenue budget, we become more reliant on the capital budget. Members will have seen this in the past when the road maintenance monies was reduced in the revenue budget. We became more reliant on using the capital money for maintenance, which meant that there was less money for members to have new things when we wanted, you know, when members have wanted new traffic calming or verge conversions and things. We couldn't afford those anymore because we're having to use more and more of our capital money alongside the revenue money to do the routine maintenance. So it's the capital money that gets squeezed, really, because we become more reliant on the capital. Well, there's three parts to K, but the first part, yeah, just looking at the reductions, it's reversing again an increase in the budget, part reversing an increase that was in 22-23. So we've sort of been at a lower level of budget than we're going to have here, and we know what that kind of looks like. It was improved, and now that's become unsustainable, and we're having to propose, in order to achieve the targets we've been given, propose some reduction. But overall, we will, as with the bridges, as we've done with the past with road maintenance, we become more reliant as well on the capital budget to support maintenance work if we get things that really need doing.
Thanks, Mike. Rob?
Yeah, I think you're going to become more reliant on the councillors reporting the damage on the speed bumps, to be honest. But there we are.
Okay, on this particular topic, I had two other indications. One was Andrew Dacey, who's got his hand up, so I'll go over to you next, Andrew.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, it's just the same thing. I come from production background, and you cut maintenance all the time because it's the easiest save. It eventually, you're kicking a can down the road, it eventually bites you in the backside. I understand obviously the problems we face in, but if you don't get increased settlement from Cardiff or London, then these type of cutbacks are going to have a lasting effect on everybody that lives in a borough, you know, with potholes and everything else. The big thing on the news this morning, it's just deteriorating around us, the country. We got to get better settlements, and that's the end of it, in my opinion. The question I had, it was more of a statement. Sorry, no. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm just going to check with Carol if she has anything to add on this particular one, because I know you indicated in pre-briefing as well.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Do you want to, Mike?
Yeah, just a minute. It's not been definitely confirmed yet, but Welsh Government are looking at reintroducing local government borrowing initiative for next year, in which they would pay the council in order to take out some additional borrowing to look at highway maintenance around dealing with potholes and prevention of potholes. So that we're potentially going to get more money from Welsh Government next year, which on top of the will mean we'll be doing more next year, even if we do have a reduction. Obviously, that's only a 1 year, and it's yet to be confirmed. But it does look very positive that we are going to get extra money for next year. So we should be doing a lot more next year in terms of maintenance, actually.
Okay, thanks. That does sound reasonably reassuring, at least a positive signal, which we don't often get. Just on this item, in relation to the drainage feasibility cut that forms part of this one. I know this was, again, one that members were particularly concerned about at the last meeting. And I just wondered if there's been any sort of further analysis really of the impact that might have in terms of accessing grant funding for drainage infrastructure, because I know that's been, a real big concern with the flooding that we've had across the authority.
Yeah, just mean we'd have to live within the money we've got, and some things will have to wait, and as much as we would like to get on and look at some more solutions to more problems, some things will just have to wait until there's money available. That's the reality.
Okay. Are there any other indications on ENVK? Can't see any there, so I'll move on now to ENVL. This is lighting services and the proposals around street lighting. So I'll go to my first indication, which was Councillor Laura Williams. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. We had the partial light trial that took place at the end of last year. The rollout/extension is not listed in the table. I'm aware we haven't received the report back to the committee detailing the impacts of the trial. I'm just looking for confirmation whether it's something that'll be revised and added at a later date, for example, outside of the budget, or is it no longer deemed viable?
So yes. So we've run the pilot. We're collating all the feedback from that. I think we're just waiting for some feedback from the police, and the lighting engineer Nathan is finalising the report, and we're just talking to Tom now about when that's going to come to this committee. So that does need to be considered by this committee. There was an existing shortfall in the energy budget. The energy budget is very difficult to predict because it is going up and down every sort of 3 months. So there was a deficit which the part night funding would plug. So if that did happen, it wouldn't provide an additional saving to what you're seeing here. It would solve an underlying issue in the energy budget. So that'll all come back to members in due course. So we're just talking to Tom and Nathan about when that report's going to be finalised and when we can bring it before you to have a look at.
Thank you. Then I had another question regarding just the wording in the table. So just clarity of the sentence. Lighting were done earlier, and high profile, so it's the high profile bit, and then again with the higher public profile on the risks.
Yeah, so it would have a higher profile in that it would be seen more. If you're dimming at 10 o'clock, obviously a lot more people are going to see it than if it's dimmed at 1 o'clock in the morning. So really that's all it means, that it will be more obvious because more people will see it. That's all that means.
Okay, thank you. Just jumping back a moment to the part night trial, if I may, in terms of the timing of a decision on that, is that anticipated to take place before the end of this financial year for the next financial year?
Well, we've been looking at whether we can get the report to you in the March board, but obviously that would then have to be considered, and whatever came out of that would have to be considered by Cabinet. And that might be a bigger trial. We're trialing it everywhere, or it might be no more, or it might be something permanent. And that decision would have to be taken. And obviously, we're moving into the summer anyway with less lighting, so it would be the urgency drops off because the main saving would be next sort of autumn and winter. So I wouldn't have thought the decision would be by the end of this financial year. No.
Thank you. No, that's useful clarity. Thanks. Okay, the next indication on this item is Councillor Rob Wood.
Thanks, Chair. It feels like I've been scrutinising this item now for over a year. It's it's getting very difficult to ask different questions on it. But, I'll just make the point that the highest number of road fatalities in the United Kingdom was in 1941. And the reason why it was at its highest then is because there were no lights on at all. And ever since, the amount of road deaths has fallen, road traffic fatalities, due to the fact of having better lighting. And, to make that correlation that light saves lives is a very important one, I think. But the question I have on it is, if the budget position were to improve next year, for example, would you reverse this decision?
We're obviously doing the pilots at the moment. The information from those pilots has not yet been finalised in terms of the assessment of it. So I think it's too early for us to make a call on that. We're going to have to have an understanding of how successful those pilots were. It may well be that decisions are made to extend the scale of the pilots. There's so many options available going forward. So I think it's too early to call really in terms of the direction of travel. So this is going to take something that's going to take time, effectively, Councillor.
Rob?
Yeah, but as I was saying, the direct correlation between improved lighting and a lowering of road traffic accidents, you think then that this would be, if we have a better budget position in the future, a priority to put the lights back to where they were?
Are you referring, Rob, to the proposals in the NVL here rather than the park night lighting in terms of the trimming and
ENVL, yes.
Yeah.
I suppose we haven't got a crystal ball at the moment, so we do not know what other pressures are going to come in at the future. Say, for example, if we had additional funding from the Welsh Government, but energy costs go through the roof at the same time, so one will wipe out the other. So we can't give any assurance that if we had additional funding at a later date from Welsh Government that we would reverse this proposal, because we don't know what other pressures would come up at that time, and we've still got structural pressures within our overall budget within the Environment Directorate at the moment that we're trying to manage. So I don't think any of us can give you that assurance, because, as I say, we don't know what the budget is going to look like, what additional costs are going to come in. So, for example, we know that national insurance, employers' national insurance, is going up. Now, that has an impact upon the council because of the commissioned services that we pay for, and we don't know what that impact is going to be yet. So there's lots of issues that impact upon us on an annual basis that we're not foreseen. So we can't give an assurance, as I say, that this proposal will be kept, because we don't know what pressures we'll be dealing with at that particular point in time in the future. So I know that's not giving you the answer that you want, but we can't give you that assurance.
Thanks, Nicola. And again, just another sort of reminder really as well that, we've got cabinet members on the call. We've got the leader here in the chamber with us who are listening to these discussions, and, ultimately it'll be their decision down the line, if we do have a more favourable budget, what to prioritise, isn't it? And, this will be one of many things feeding into those thoughts. We've seen some of that already with the proposals that have been taken out from the last budget, but going into the future, we'd hope the conversations will be, as you've put, Rob, what things do we reverse, what things do we not cut, rather than what things are we going to be cutting. And if we're into that territory, we're in actually a much better place than we've been in a long time. I think it's a good sign that we're even considering it now. I've got an indication from Councillor Bob Wolford. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to kind of level off what Councillor Wood was saying. I understand that statistics show, 1941, there were a lot of fatalities and whatever. However, since 1941, vehicles have increased exponentially as well. They have much better brakes, they have much better lighting. I have a vehicle now that goes from high beam to low beam automatically on its own. So I don't think we can put all of those statistics on the fact that street lighting. We must look at other factors as well that have changed.
That's a fair observation, Bob. Thanks for that. I'm going to just bring in two other committee members, and I can see Councillor Hurley's got indicating to speak as well. Councillor Cttee James, you indicated in pre-briefing.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's around the dimming and the changing of the time from 10 till 1. Having read back through the notes of the previous meeting, the question that I originally had has been answered, but it's raised another one. You said in the last meeting that it's not an irreversible decision, that it's easy enough to adjust the timing in particular areas if issues arise. I wondered, is there going to be any formal monitoring, or is it just going to be reactive? If something happens in a particular area, then you'll look at it. Thanks.
Thanks, Cttee.
Well, just to confirm, with the central management system, yes, we can turn the wick up and we can turn it down wherever quite easily. We obviously do monitor what happens on the highway. Dave's section with road safety get all the reports from everything that happens, so and they get circulated. So, if we get that sort of monitoring going on all the time, obviously members are out there as well. You're the representatives of your communities, and I'm sure that if there are concerns, you will come to us as you do now, and us working with road safety would look at those issues and see if there's anything that needs to be done.
Cttee?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Councillor Tim Bowen, Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is, where we've done the trials on the dimming, have we had any residents come back that had actually noticed the lights have been dimmed? Second question, and have we dimmed the lights as much as what we want to achieve?
Well, we were turning them off in the park night lighting at certain times. So that report's all going to come back to you. Yes, we've had some feedback. We've had some positive feedback. We've had lots of people who actually like the lights off, so they obviously haven't got blackout curtains and they can sleep a lot better with the street lights off. Finally, you get other people who are obviously concerned about outside. So there's a whole range of feedback that's come back, and that will all come back to you in due course.
And have we dimmed them as much as what we want to achieve? Or can we go lower?
Well, in those areas, we've actually been switching them off.
So
not a question of dimming. They've actually been turned off altogether. And just to go back to earlier, obviously when choosing those areas, we're making sure we avoid things like areas of vehicle pedestrian conflict, crossings and junctions and that type of thing. So we do take that into account in the proposals as well.
Okay.
Okay, I'll bring in Councillor Jeremy Hurley now. Jeremy.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's just to go back to Councillor Wood's remarks regarding comparing data from 1941, and just what Councillor Wolford said as well. Things change. I'm assuming that the data back from 1941 was no lights at all, whereas we're only talking about specific times, almost in the middle of the night. So we've got to be relative. We can't be using data, or we need accurate data to compare. And I'm sure that we'll be monitoring data as this continues, and there will be changes if there's any problems. If there's anything that we pick up that's an issue, then it'll be looked at again, but it's got to be based around accurate assessment and accurate data and feedback as well. I can't see us at the point of comparing back where it's not going to be like for like. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I've got an indication from Councillor Paddison.
Thank you very much. I will be brief, Chair. One thing that won't show up on any of your data is the fear of women and girls who have to travel when the lights are dimmed. Now, I understand it's in the middle of the night, but still, that's one thing that has changed since 1941. We do have a certain level of freedom now, and that, we are out and about, maybe even working through the night. So one thing that won't show up is the fear of having to walk down streets that aren't lit. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Observation well made. And I've got an indication from Councillor Carol Clement-Williams as well. Carol.
Thanks. I'm sure Rob will put me right if I'm wrong here, but I think his point wasn't so much the actual numbers, but that he's just trying to say that there is a correlation between lighting and accidents. However, my point would be I was in Powys before I got married, and I regularly travel back home because my family still live there. And in Cwmtorch, they were turning off right by the tip, actually, in Bethel Road. There's a long stretch where they used to turn the lights off and in the built-up area completely. Yet it's a well-known route for people coming from local pubs down towards Yslavera, that way. You're taking it now to an hour before stop tap. So just want to sort of let it be on our radar that even though some of the areas don't have any housing or what have you, they are sometimes routes home at that time of night. So just to sort of, keep that in mind when we're deciding which areas we're dimming or turning off on. It's just a point. I don't need an answer, but thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I don't know if anyone does want to respond to any of those observations. If there's anything to say.
Thank you, councillors. I think on the budget proposals that are before you today, there is no proposal that you are looking to consider for part nighttime lighting. It is for dimming only. If we were to follow in the assessment of the pilot, if we were to propose part nighttime lighting, then it would be brought back before members for determination. But at the moment, in terms of these savings, it's just dimming and trimming. Thank you.
Okay, I think just in terms of the observations that have been made, I think they apply to both proposals, really, particularly around concerns around, safety, women and girls and that sort of thing. I think, dimming will have an effect as well. So it's important that we're clear about what we're scrutinising, but I think a lot of the observations are valid on both sets of proposals as well. I can't see any other indications on this item at the moment, so I'll move on to ENVP, and that's for cemeteries, and I've got an indication from Councillor Ros Davis.
Diolch yn fawr. I'm wondering, what is the increase in fees and charges per burial? Do you have that information, please?
Taking this one?
Okay, Chair. Yeah, so to achieve the £24,000 saving, we would need a 10% increase. And if you look, for example, on the main one, which is a burial depth of 2 grave, that's currently £2,100, and that would increase to £2,310, which would be, when we've mentioned Bridgend, which would be £300 less than Bridgend is now.
Okay, thank you. Ros, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Were there any other members that had any comments on this item? I can't see any, so I'll move on to ENVS, and this is development management, some trimming of budget lines. I think the only indication here was from Councillor Carl Clement Williams around the statutory advertising. I don't know if you had an observation to make there, Carol.
No, it's fine, thank you, Chair.
Okay, no problem at all. Again, we did discuss that quite thoroughly last time, and it was just a note for members to lobby if they felt that was something that they wish to do around the necessary statutory advertisements. Okay, I'll move on to ENVT. This is at the bottom of the page, and I've got an indication from Councillor Laura Williams. Laura.
Thank you, Chair. It was touched on previously, but I'm just still looking for if this will affect the RLDP timeline. And then I also have a question around if the transfer of extra pressures to officers will impact the ability for members to raise specific concerns or queries regarding developments in their wards. Thank you.
Kerry?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. No, we don't anticipate it affecting the RLDP timeline. Obviously, the members will be aware that it's quite a detailed programme. I mean, I think we did discuss at the last scrutiny discussion that this isn't the first time that we've reduced the budget in this particular line. So, if we keep doing it, in the longer term, and if we keep going back to this particular line, it will have inevitably an impact the team's ability and may ultimately then potentially have some timescale issues. Members will be aware, obviously, the team are under quite a lot of pressure with the RLDP program. It is an onerous and time-consuming task with various formal and informal stages. But as I said, the team will always be mindful of the need to respond to members' queries as and when they get them, and I think the work that they're doing is excellent in that regard. So, good job.
All right, happy. Okay, and I had an indication from Councillor Bob Wilford. It was along similar lines, so I'm not sure if you've got any additional questions, Bob.
No, thank you, Chair. That's fine.
Okay, no problem. So we'll then move on to ENVU. So we're over the page now. And my first indication on this one is Councillor Rob Wood. Again, we covered this one quite thoroughly at the last meeting. So if there's any follow-up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I've been back over the minutes. I'm just a little bit concerned because, as I say, with it being closed in two sections now, the coastal path, it's almost as if Neath Talbot is withdrawing from its obligations to the coastal path. We know that it's being there's underwash causing the path to come away, but it's a national project. It's something we should be proud of, and I'd like to see work being done on the future of the coastal path and how we can implement it better rather than a sort of constantly stepping back and having to close, as is pointed out in the risks, different sections, cutting money again. It's something we should be proud of and something we should be looking to invest in, not something we should be looking to cut. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. I had another indication from Councillor Andrew Dacey. Again, I think this is along similar lines, so I'll bring you in, Andrew, if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just that the NRW got to do pull their finger out as well in repairs of the bank, that the particular part that Rob's talking about. But the actual path itself isn't in great nick. I walk quite a bit around the borough, and it needs to be looked after, and we need more grants on it. We got more officers looking for more grants that's out there for these paths. I know we've missed out on big lumps in the past because we've had a lack of people looking at these grants. Are we looking for more grants now?
Okay, thanks both. Kerry?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to give members some reassurance, we're certainly not withdrawing from our obligations in terms of the Wales Coast Path. The team realised, the roles and responsibilities that they have. In fact, the team has got a proven track record in terms of sourcing grant monies, and the team are consistently doing a lot of work in terms of constantly reviewing and monitoring where grant monies can be sourced. I think we discussed in detail the reasons for the closures in the last meeting, and I certainly would agree with the point made that it's as much a role for NRW and ourselves, and indeed the landowner Welsh Government to address that issue, particularly the issue at the quays, and the team are in dialogue with colleagues in Welsh Government and NRW to see what options there are in terms of resolving that problem once and for all. I mean, I think it is perhaps important to reiterate again that particular issue at that point, the team have utilised a lot of grant monies in the past to temporarily address the issue, but because of the nature of the problem keeps coming back. So there is a bigger a project required that probably requires capital investment to address it at that location. And I think we did clarify at the last meeting that the path is closed for public health and safety grounds. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kerry. Rob, do you have any response you want to make? Andrew?
No, that's fine. It's just that it would be nicer if we had a better standard, just because it's not the greatest path.
Okay, thank you. Just one observation from me as chair is, obviously this responsibility of this is sitting with yourself at the minute, caring in the countryside team, and I think we did mention it in the last meeting as well. Obviously, we're promoting tourism quite a bit now, and we're seeing these things as quite a key part of the visitor attraction to the borough. And I suppose the question to ask is, are we working cross department to look at other colleagues perhaps drawn it into bigger regeneration schemes. I'm thinking, we've just done looking at the seafront strategy, and we were talking about how far do we pull that? And if we're looking at regeneration strategies for our town centres, actually, if we're looking at tourism, this is a big part of that. And I'm wondering if other colleagues are willing and able to look at some of these problems and not say it's your problem, Kerry, but for other people to pick up. And I'm looking at Nicola here, perhaps for some assurance, I suppose, that we are going to consider that in terms of not just seeing it as a countryside rights of way problem, but as a whole council opportunity as well.
Yeah, and you'll be aware that there is a tourism leisure service under Chris Saunders now, and there's a tourism strategy. There is now an events policy and an events strategy. So there is an onus on all of the directorates to work together, and all the services within the individual directorates to work together to ensure that we're investing in infrastructure, not just for our existing communities, but for visitors coming into the county borough. But there is only limited money. We have got a team or a working group looking at lessons learned from how different services deliver activity using volunteers and so on. But it's not free because there are requirements for health and safety and insurance indemnities, etc., to be in place. And the cost in terms of putting those provisions in place and having the supervision from our staff sometimes outweighs the benefit from it. So we are looking at all of those opportunities because it would be foolish of us not to. So yes, it is a cross-council responsibility, but the day-to-day maintenance of the rights of way does sit with Kerry and his team.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola, and I appreciate it. I think coming at it from the larger capital sort of schemes here, and obviously, Simon's team under you have got a lot of experience in drawing down funding and delivering those capital projects, and perhaps more so than some of the smaller schemes that happen under countryside. So I think that's probably why I turned to you in the meeting to just have some assurance that it's on their radar.
And I think there is a significant problem, because I suppose this is a revenue budget that we're talking about. So it's the day-to-day management and maintenance. And we are successful in getting capital funding from various different sources. But the revenue consequences of maintaining those assets thereafter is something that we've been banging on about for a long time with Welsh Government. It's not just about putting a nice shiny structure in place that is great. It's about maintaining it thereafter. And for years and years and years, Welsh Government seem to be ignoring that. It's the same with active travel routes, same with sort of council projects that we're delivering in public realm. You couldn't put it in place, but it's only going to look as good as it is on day one if you look after it afterwards. And we don't get that revenue funding from Welsh Government. So it's something that we should continue to lobby as officers and as councillors, so that we get that revenue funding that links into the capital allocation.
Thanks, Nick. I think that is a good point, and I'll add one more point from the chair around us reflecting on our own arrangements internally as well, and particularly if I think about tourism infrastructure, or if I think of footpaths. I mean, there's things that Kerry's team will do, there's things that will be done under Mike, and things that Dave will be doing. So there's heads of service all over the shop dealing with infrastructure that, let's say, a visitor would use. And that does sometimes lead to an inconsistent approach in terms of our own revenue spending. I think that is just something we need to reflect on when we have corporate priorities in our corporate plan, which are great. Sometimes it can be a little bit muddled, can't it, when we've got different heads of service and sometimes different directorates entirely dealing with and trying to implement that vision and that ambition of the authorities. So that's just a reflection from me for us all to think about, because a little gap in the coastal path can undermine a wider strategy that other colleagues are working really hard on, and that's no fault of Kerry's. It's just something for us to reflect on as well. I can see comes to Dave. He's popped his hand back up. So do you want to come in, Andrew?
Yeah, just perhaps if they devolve the Crown Estate like we want, then perhaps they could spend a substantial amount of money on improving the path and tourism and replacing the heavy industry that they've annihilated over the years. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, I'll move on now to ENVV. And I've got an indication from Councillor Williams. I'm not sure if this one's been answered with the minutes or if there's a further question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a statement and then a couple of questions, just clarifying. So my first one is the statement that has been covered before, so it has been spoken before, and that it was just stating that if any more cuts are made in the future, I just wanted to raise the fact that the risks literally state ability to work safely. So just want to raise that as a concern. My actual questions then, so what impact do we think this will have on the teams applying for grants in the future? And is the proposed reduction in biodiversity projects forecast to impact the Council's resilience against climate change? As we all know, we've witnessed several severe weather events over the recent months. Are we not going against the direction of travel then we should be going in? Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Kerry.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I think we clarified in the last meeting that this was the first time that we'd cut this particular budget line. So again, there's no immediate issues with this particular proposal. But again, if we do this year on year, if we revisit this budget line, ultimately it will inevitably have an impact. I think the biggest issue is that to answer your question, it's not going to undermine the team's ability to go for grant money or to roll out project work that both deliver on the nature and climate emergencies. I mean, I think, I think moving forward, it's more that we've just got to be careful that we don't continue to raid this particular pot, because this pot is often used for, simple things like PPE clothing for staff, the tools that they require to do the work on a day-to-day. Just one example to give you, the team have recently had to purchase a new infrared camera to carry out bat surveys. With the new regulations that have come in, there's a need for enhanced survey work as part of that work. So the team needed that equipment specifically to carry out that responsibility. So that's what the line is there for. That's what the budget is often used for. Again, no immediate concerns at the moment, but it's not something that we could certainly repeat year on year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Grace, are there any other indications on this item? I can't see any there. So we'll move on to ENVW, and this was the reduction in the works in default budget and the dangerous structures out of hours cover. And this was one of the ones that I was surprised to still see in, because of the ones that came out, I was hoping this one would be with it. It was one of the ones that concerned me, particularly around what our role is in dangerous structures. And one of the things which we didn't follow up after the last meeting, but was trying to understand a little bit more around what our role is in those scenarios. And appreciate the report and the response last time references other emergency agencies will be attending. So I don't know whether you can give any clarity in today's meeting about the specific nature of our role when we attend those, but my concern is still there around what is a relatively small amount of money, but actually potentially a large public safety issue about us doing our bit anyway.
I think the quickest and easiest way to approach this particular question, Chair, is that I do recall, and I must apologise for not circling. I think one of the asks from the last discussion was you asked for perhaps a brief note to be circulated which clarified the roles, responsibilities, and any potential risks that would come with that. I do have that available. So what I perhaps propose, Chair, is via Tom, I'll circulate that now so members can have a quick look at that particular document. I mean, I think ultimately, I think we did clarify at the last meeting that there is no legal obligation to do this work, and indeed there are quite a number of local authorities across Wales that don't provide this service. But I think perhaps, I think if there are any major incidents that do occur, obviously the emergency services, the police and the fire service will attend in the first instance. They would sort of cordon off, seal any particular site in advance of any officers coming. I think all this proposal would ultimately mean is that officers would attend the next working day as opposed to any particular out of hours. So, there could be potential reputational damage for the council from partner agencies as associated with this particular proposal. But as I said, I think the best approach is for me to circulate that paper via Tom now, so members can review that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, that would be appreciated. I think if we understand it a bit more, I'm sure we could give some more valuable feedback, and we do still have some time during the budget consultation process. I think just one thing I'll just flag in terms of, what my limited understanding is, of course, that this would be the staff that would attend out of hours would be staff trained to understand whether a structure is dangerous or not. And I think that's perhaps where my concern would lie is, if a member of the public has a concern at the minute, they could call our out of hours number and somebody could attend and say, it's okay, there's not a problem, or it is a problem, we need to take action. If that isn't happening, then we're reliant on a member of the public calling the police or the fire service who may not be qualified to make that assessment. And I think that's perhaps where I'm a little bit confused as to how that would work on a Saturday. If a member of the public has a concern, how that could be, best addressed. And I appreciate we'll have the note, but if there's anything you can add to that at the moment, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I think perhaps the one thing to add at this stage is that things could still happen on an ad hoc basis. I think taking away the rota would remove the guarantee that an officer would be available to go and check site. But I think that would be the implication, I think, for members to consider ultimately.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Are there any other indications from members on this one? No, I can't see any. Okay, so that takes us to the end of the items that we'll be scrutinising in public. So if there are any other items members want to go back to or comments they want to make before we go into private, then please make them now. But I can't see any indications. So I'm just checking. Well, we don't have any other public items to consider either, do we? Bear with me 1 second. Okay, members. So as I said, we need to consider the next two items in private. And also to do that, I need a proposal and a seconder for us to move into private session. Can I have a proposal?
I move, Chair.
I second, Chair.
And seconded by Councillor Carol Clement-Williams. Members, if you've not indicated the contrary by raising your hands, I'll assume you're in favour of moving into private session.
Chair, do you mind if I could just read out the legal part of it? Just, I'm sorry, only because it's not on our agenda. So cool. Just so everyone knows. So the relevant section and what the chair has proposed is to resolve to exclude the public for the following items pursuant to section 100A. Paragraph 4 and 5 of the Local Government Act 1972 and the relevant exempt paragraphs of Part 4 of Schedule 12A to the above Act. Sorry for that. Thank you.
No, thanks for that clarity. Of course, it's normally on the agenda, isn't it? No problem. So we've had a proposal and a seconder for that. And Sarah?
Yeah, I was just wondering what were the relevant paragraphs? Do we know?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, I'm afraid. I can get that if you'd like me to get it now.
Perhaps you could drop me an email. I'm just curious. Yeah. I've had a quick look through and I wasn't 100%.
No, that's understandable.
Okay, thanks.
I can send that to you after, certainly. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, just for clarity, can I just have a proposal and a seconder again, just so we're all clear on what Tom's read out there?
I move, Chair.
Proposed by Councillor Rob Wood. And seconded by Councillor Carol Clement-Williams. Thank you. So if you do not raise your hands, I'll assume we're in favour of moving into private session.
See no indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, we'll now move into private session.
Okay, thank you. I'll just wait for Tom to confirm the recording stopped and any public and press have left the meeting.